Good morning, everyone. Sorry I'm a little late. Had a few technical issues, although it looks like I'm right on time, so I'm being wizardly. Welcome back to another Ask Me Anything stream. It's been a kind of a tough week, and we did just come off the roller coaster of the 3 consecutive streams for designing Call of Cthulhu. And so I thought it'd be nice to just take a nice, easy Sunday and chat about whatever. I'm looking a little short in my seat here, so I'm gonna go ahead and adjust my mic or my camera. So we got our RW Bishop and From the Hilt. Hey Logan, how's it going? GM Cody, welcome. All right, so couple things. I've been enjoying meeting new people and finding new streams. From the Hilt, enjoyed popping into your stream last time. GM Cody, you're doing great stuff on your channel. I really dig it. And I got to agree with a lot of people that voice is just, you got a voice for radio. Grumpy Old Slan, welcome. Mara Hawkman. I said Hawkman this time, not Hawkwood. I'm sure I'll say Hawkwood again. But, and I got some wicked light coming from somewhere on my face. I apologize if I look all washed out. Oh, yeah. So today I don't have anything planned. I just figured I would, BS about anything that came to mind, and then take requests or answer questions from the chat. So I already got a request from our Hawkman to talk about adapting favorite IP to games, something I used to do a lot back in the day. And let's see, got my co-pilot in the back there. Ophelia is a constant companion down here in the basement with me during my workday and all of that. So funny thing about this cat, I don't know if you're cat people or anything. Back in Washington, where we moved from, she was one of many cats in the house, and she was not a good cat. She would do her business, wherever, she wanted. She was an indoor-outdoor cat. Very much not a team player when it came to being a cat. Drive her across the country to Missouri and park her in a house where she's the only cat, and she is completely transformed. Totally different beast. Very friendly, doesn't make messes, doesn't get into things. She's just a completely different cat. It's crazy. So if you ever have a problem cat, it's just, maybe it's, a problem pet. It could just be that the environment is wrong for it. She even made the drive across country no problem. I mean, we're afraid we're gonna have to cage her or whatever. She just roamed around the cabin of the van. It's cool. Anyways, that was an aside to let things warm up. All right, I guess I'll start here. Okay, hold on. RW Bishop has a good one here. Some people train a whole lifetime just to opportunity to strike one blow. Do you think the concept of struggle or resisting is more important than victory or defeat? In what context? In the context of a story, in the context of a plot, in the context of a D&D campaign, or any gaming campaign? I feel like it is and it is not. Honestly, struggle can be fun, and struggle certainly, and challenge is certainly worthwhile in games. It's nearly critical for a story, but games are not stories. And I think some of the mistakes a lot of people make when trying to run games is thinking of them as stories, like they're creating a story. The story unfolds based on the player's actions, not the GM's. The GM creates plot. So I would say that depends on what you're trying to accomplish. As far as adapting IP, Hawkman is talking about something I think that he saw me mentioning on From the Hilt's Discord, where and maybe on his stream, where I was talking about how back in high school I had a good buddy of mine who he and I would create games um, based on our favorite cartoons. Whatever Saturday morning or after school cartoon was really, just grooving with us at the time, we would make characters for them. We would make games for them. I got to the point where we did so frequently that we had created sort of our own ad hoc system of statting up the characters from these worlds, and sort of had our own default system that we would do, and we would play everything, anything that caught our eye. I mean, the ones that the short list that comes immediately to mind would be He-Man, Thundercats, GI Joe, Transformers, Galaxy Rangers, Silverhawks, um, those, and then like we even did Disney's Gummy Bears. If you've never watched the old Gummy Bears cartoon from Disney, it's like their very first made for network television um, cartoon series. It's actually a pretty solid fantasy setting, and so we would draw up our own gummy bear characters and play in that world. Or not always gummy bear characters. I mean, sometimes we would create characters that weren't on the normal path. Like for example, like for our He-Man and Thundercats games. Hey, Mechhead, how's it going? Jason, welcome. Um, so for our He-Man and Thundercats games, we each created a different world that our character would be from, and then created a host of characters to support those characters, similar to, how He-Man has Man at Arms and Ram Man and all of those guys, and his own set of villains. We created our own Eternias that our own Master of the Universe basically came from, and whatever associated characters. And for our Thundercats game, we each created another world like Thundera that had fallen to a similar fate with a different animal species that was now the source for the um, humanoids. And so, like my friend did the Thunderbirds or the Thunderhawks, I think he called them, and so his were all bird themed people. And I think I did a race of reptiles, like reptile people who not like Slythe and the mutants, but like the Thundercats, where they were mostly human looking, but they had animal features, and so our characters all had come to a Thundera where the Thundercats had already been established, and started kind of joining their fight against Slythe and the mutants and whatever threats followed them. Because of course, with a cast of new characters, we also would create a cast of new villains, and all of this is really just because he and I were. And shout out to Garth if you ever actually ever bother to watch my stream. um, I know you're busy writing books and having a life, but it was all really just an excuse for he and I, who are both very artsy kids, to just draw new characters. And if you're gonna draw characters and you're a gamer, you're gonna game with those characters. When we played the Marvel Superheroes role playing game, we had a stack of notebooks like this thick, probably with brand new characters. Um, uh, and it I think we joked at one time that we had probably, between the two of us, created as many characters as there already were in the Marvel universe for our Marvel game. Um, we were never content to just play with the characters that were there. We would create our own organizations. Like I had Loam, the Legion of Anti-Mutants. Yes, dumb names, but I had my own uniform for them. I had superpowered agents. I had, it was my own villainous group. Um, let's see, what do we got here? You know, it's funny because people want to. I'm gonna go on a bit of a rant here. One of the big complaints about fifth edition right now is that it's become the fuzzy animal campaign setting, and it's only in modern context that there seems to be this weird push against humanoid animal races. Um, there's the whole it's a furry game now. The whole furry thing is blown way out of proportion. Everything gets slapped as a furry thing. And the fact of the matter is that just because it's a humanoid animal doesn't make it a furry thing. The anthropomorphic animal scene has been around since the 80s and earlier, and it was a huge rage in comic books. And I'm sorry, but some of those animals were badass. But what where I was going with this though is that old D&D had all these characters too. If you look, it's funny. I've been watching Mr. Welch's massive coverage of Mystara, and what I've realized from watching that is Mystara is everything that people want to bitch and moan about 5e's campaign setting, not the system, but the setting being. But it was totally cool back then. And I mean, everything that they bitch about there being in modern 5e setting was there in Mystara. And in spades. I mean, you had gnomes with airplanes and, a race of cat people on the moon. I mean, you know, so yeah, I mean, your continent in Lenharo, that's like Third Earth. I mean, why not? Humanoid animals are a staple not only of fantasy but of folklore. It's just part of folklore mythology. Thundercats as in Rifts, I can see that. I mean, Rifts allows you to bring in anything. We played for the longest time with. Um, we basically took our modern mutant characters from TMNT and had them slip through a rift and end up in Rift's Earth before. Absolutely, Marhawkman, Bugs Bunny was normal. Daffy Duck was normal. Nobody's going around, no, Bugs Bunny, that damn furry. No, you know, um, let's see. There's a lot of good stuff here. Well, yeah. I mean, and also comic books, if you're true to the comic, I think one of the biggest problems with comic books nowadays is they just take themselves too seriously. So Legion of Anti-Mutants is totally comic bookish, just depending on what point in time you're gripping on. Oh man. Yeah, the Rakasta are catfolk. Um, you could make in modern 5e, if you really wanted to dive into it, you could get in and have it to where you have Rakasta and then do sub races. I know in my old D&D games, I had the greater Rakasta because back in D&D where you had lesser and greater stuff, I'm just gonna have to start starring stuff, man. These people are just going crazy fast on me. Got a Mage's Musings in here. But yeah, you could easily do sub races then for other things. I had the greater Rakasta, and my greater Rakasta were my civilized Rakasta, and they were the people of a kingdom called Sithrun, which was sort of a Egypt analog. And so they were, when I drew them, I drew my illustration for the greater Rakasta was this cat lady in a very Cleopatra kind of outfit with backgrounds, as opposed to the more nomadic Rakasta that were depicted on the Isle of Dread. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah. So, Cody, have you ever picked up an issue of Albedo Anthropomorphics from the 80s? It was sort of a anthology magazine with an ongoing comic, and if you're not familiar with it, and for the folks who may not be familiar with it, it was an anthology magazine that featured the Irma Felna EDF comic series, and Steve Galacci, who is a Seattle artist, I met him once, and turns out he used to do art with my good friend's dad. Back in the day, they even did a comic together. I never knew this. Anyways, very hard sci-fi. hard sci-fi, but all of the characters in it are animals, and it's a really cool story. I'm not going to bust it for you because I don't want to like spoil any of the stuff. Unfortunately, it was not mainstream enough, so it suffered from all those indie comic problems of like weird release schedules and never, having a reliable distribution. Most of them, in fact, I think all of the original issues are now available as digital comics. So if you can't pick up the print versions, you can find them. So I definitely suggest looking up Albedo Anthropomorphics. But Steve Galacki or Galacci, can never remember the way to pronounce his name. There have also been a couple of RPGs written in that world. There was a first and a second edition, and I think a third of the RPG. It's a fun world. There's actually a miniatures range for it now, which something that I always wanted. So yeah, Albedo is definitely a good example of 1980s non goofy um, animal anthropomorphic animal stuff. And you're right. It really sucks that it's got this weird stain on it nowadays that anything animal based is free. Now, granted, back in the 80s, there were some underground comics that were in the adult realm that did feature animal characters. That was just a thing. Omaha Cat Dancer is a good one. But at the same time, that's always been the case with any subject matter. So our, it's just like the internet, or would they always joke around. Any advancement in science will always somebody will always figure out how to use it for two things: war and porn. You know, so, um, let's see. Yes, Greek myths had minotaurs and harpies. Greek myths were so big on animal hybrids that there are like 5 different versions of centaurs in Greek myth, in all different configurations. Um, let's see. Well, the furry thing isn't modern politics though. That is modern pop cultural bias is what it is. It's letting a meme become an opinion. And that's really what it is. It's like, that furry thing, and then people really start to it's like people being afraid of clowns. The whole fear of clowns thing started out as a few people with a legitimate fear, but a lot of people just grabbing onto it for meme value. And now people are just like, "Oh my god, clowns!" I mean, there are no offense to anybody who's actually afraid of clowns. A phobia is an irrational fear. Anyways. But yeah, the whole furry thing is also like that. It's like, you know what? First of all, what somebody wants to do with their life is not my business, and they're not hurting anybody. And second of all, you know, if you have too limited of an imagination to where anything furry animal is furry, and you can't accept a reality where there are uh, degrees of a thing or variations on a thing, then I can't help you. It's not my job. I don't get paid enough to help you. So, um, let's see. Yeah, and you shouldn't care, Cody. I mean, because that you and I and people who are fans of TMNT know that the TMNT are hardcore badasses. And even if they weren't hardcore badasses, let's say they were sensitive story characters, they're still legitimate characters with legitimate story, and they are far more than just some memeish adherence to, oh, they're furry. Not to mention they're turtles. So how furry is a turtle? Uh, let's see. Let's see. Where are we going here? I would disagree, because our generation created Mystara. Our generation created games where anthropomorphic characters were there. Our generation ate up the anthropomorphic animal craze of the 80s. Even though our generation may not have been drawing those characters, we certainly made them profitable enough to where the TMNT are still around today, completely detached from their original creators. They're still sustainable on their own. Um, and there's so many hardcore stories that are told with animal characters. There's a one of my favorite RPGs I've talked about is called Justifiers. It's an indie game from back in the late 80s, early 90s. And the primary character race in there are the betas, which are beta class humanoids, because they're the alpha class hybrids, not humanoids, hybrids. Alpha class hybrids were regular animals with human intelligence, so like a golden retriever with the brain of with the thought processing power of a human. And then they made the beta hybrids, who are human shaped, basically the best of both. And then you go out and explore worlds, and you're property of a corporation and everything. Um, and you basically get slingshotted one way to an unknown world that you have to justify. You have to basically go there, survey it, spend X amount of time there before your return transmat gate even activates, assuming that it survives long enough for you to reassemble. And then you have to wait like 2 months for a follow up party if they never hear from you. Uh, yeah, but that would be furry. But again, I don't think it's the new generation. I don't think it's a new generation, old generation thing. Um, I think the I think there's a particularly grumpy category of older gamers who have inflated in their heads that there is a problem where there really isn't much of one, and just don't have the issue to conceive of people having fun that they don't themselves enjoy. Um, but yeah, um, soapbox. I'll put my soapbox away now. Let's see. There's that. I mean, the Isle of Dr. Moreau. Yes, that grand furry tale. But let's get off the furry stuff for a moment. Um, the whole point was bringing IPs in that you enjoy into. That was what Mar Hockman had been down about, is bringing IPs that you enjoy into games, and you can do that. Honestly, nowadays there's so many game systems. It'd be easy to find one that fits. When I know that when we did GI Joe back in the day, we just used the Twilight 2000 game system for coming up with the stats for our characters. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah. GI Joe gamer. um, yeah, I mentioned Omaha before. Um, yeah, and that was early on talking about, yes. Even back then, there were animal characters of questionable content. Um, and we have the Luxodons in D&D, which I believe are a Mystaran race that got ported over to 5e. Let's see. You guys are on fire today. I really appreciate it. We got 8 folks here, so this is good. You know, I still think it's that 90% of it is a meme. It's just cool to be. I know lots of people who are like, "Oh, I have arachnophobia." No, you're afraid of spiders. There's a difference. Like, I don't have arachnophobia. I'm afraid of some spiders. At the same time, I will capture and release any spider I find that I know I can approach without being in danger. When when my kids were little and we moved into a new house, I made a point of capturing all the spiders that I would come across in a clear container and spending a little time with the kids and then talking to them about which ones were okay and which ones to steer clear of. And now, of course, I live in Missouri, where we have spiders that can actually hurt you. And so I give them a little less quarter now. Uh, you know, it's like, all right, I'm not going to get close enough to see if you have a fiddle on your back. So bye. Um, let's see. Yeah, scalies. I know in 40K they had the scalies. Um, they were the mutants in the Underhive. Animan in the 90s. Yeah, you're right. The Knights of Wendigore from Marvel from back in the day. Animal human hybrids. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with spiders. I mean, honestly, in my old house, we had spiders in the corners of most of the rooms in our house. I would rather have a spider in my house who's just gonna sit there and hang out in the corner up on the wall and keep the mosquito population down and take care of any flies that manage to sneak past the perimeter. Um, I'd rather have him there than anything else. I mean, I do have a couple of nightmare stories about spiders that are funny, but did they change my life and make me freak out? No. Again, not dissing anybody who has a legitimate fear of spiders or actually has arachnophobia. That's different. We're talking about meme-ish, meme-like behavior in which we're like, oh, I'm afraid of this. I am terrified of sharks. I'm terrified of deep water. Hey, geek, you're not going to catch me on a boat. Not unless there's a wall around me. Or a very wide deck that I can go up on. Like I will go up on the deck on a ferry boat or something like that. Um, but no, I'm not going sailing, and I'm like not likely to go into a deep sea fishing boat. Um, yeah, I think I wouldn't go so far as to say I have thalassophobia, but yeah, I definitely don't like the ocean. Yeah, well, Marhawkman, I've been traumatized by a barracuda as a child. Visiting my brother's grandfather in New York. He was a sport fisherman and commercial fisherman, fishing in the Atlantic most of his life. And so I went into the guest bedroom at age 4, turned on the light, only to be confronted immediately by the mounted head of a barracuda projecting from the opposing wall right at me. And yeah, I was not sleeping in that room for a while until it was explained to me exactly what was going on. But I was 4. Um, um, First of all, I wouldn't have approached it because it was built by dumbasses who don't believe in safety. But that's another soapbox. Let's see. So Cody, TMNT, you mentioned it, and I really like the idea of the bedknobs and broomsticks. Kingdom that was cursed and became animal folk. Yeah, this is just an amazing example of how good campaign worlds are built from little bits and pieces that you grab here. Even the classic D&D worlds, if you think about the D&D worlds that the OG guys were making, that they were pulling in and porting in from everything they had read. I mean, and so when we do that from modern media, yes, it may not be some dusty book that was in our grandfather's library, but it's still legit because it's something that comes to us um from a shared consciousness. um let's see. What do we got going on here? Sip my coffee while I look through the comments. Let's see. Well, you joke. In 6th grade, my cousin and I entered into an arms race between our two D&D kingdoms that we had created, and it got nuts. At one point, I had naval vessels that were powered by harnessed sea serpents. Basically, imagine a ship's hull, and uh, inside the hull, are two cavities that go down to the water. Within each of those is a tack and harnessed sea serpent that's attached to the ship. And so they swim along in these little hulls, in these little holes in the hull, and push the ship because they're pushing against the chains that they're chained for. Yeah, so I mean, why not? Magical fantasy conveyances. Why not? Um, there's a what movie was it that I just watched recently? Wife and I watched. It was, I think, an animated movie, or maybe not. Maybe it was a live action. I can't remember. But they get on this boat and they're going across the water, and oh yeah, it was the Willow series. As love it or leave it. Was not a fan. Not because it's not like the old Willow, just because it was badly done. Um, uh, they get on a ship, on a boat that's being pulled by something under the water. You never see it because, of course, I guess their budget was small, or at least it was never on screen long enough for me to catch it. You know, um, but yeah, I mean, why not? Magical conveyances. Um, I know that we had, in that arms race between my cousin and I, we had chariots that had wings of flying attached to them, with twin mounted wands of fireballs, on the bow, and they would be operated by two crew. One would be a warrior who was piloting the flying chariot, and the other would be, a warrior who was operating the fireballs, wands of fireball. And so they would fly through the sky and strafe the uh, the ships that we had on the sea. Let's see. Why not, man? Because, like, back in the day, we we captured the Isle of Dread. Now, mind you, I've been playing D&D since I was 8, so there was a lot of very immature gamer time in my time as a gamer. At one point, we had captured and taken over the Isle of Dread, walled the whole island up, and then dug a tunnel from the Isle of Dread to the known world under the seafloor, so we could trade easily without having to resort to ships across the top of the ocean, because dumb kids. Um, but we had fun. Let's see. Why not? I mean, it's funny, if you look at some of the official magic items from back in the day, and which have then been brought forward, a lot of the command words are still silly. And there's a case for that, because a silly word, um, like abracadabra and all of that, is less likely to be mentioned in common parlance. You don't want to have a flaming sword, for example, whose command word is fire. Be, you know, oops, my sword went off. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, there's your campaign seed. It's like going back to the whole, like, anything can be a campaign seed, or an adventure seed. We did that Call of Cthulhu adventure off of the mail getting stolen. Uh, you yeah. So I mean, why not? Beg, borrow, and steal. Um, Pull in from everything. Yeah, I mean, you definitely don't want your command word to be a commonly spoken word, or at least have the magic be something to the effect of, you have to be like bonded to the weapon or whatever. Or if it has to be spoken by the guy wielding it, but you still don't want it to be anything common, because if you're like sitting around with your your flaming sword on your hilt, and you're around the or on your hip, and you're around the campfire, and you're like, it's getting cold, we should get this fire going, and suddenly your sword blazes into action, then you've got a problem there. Uh, Chose an example of translating to IP, translating IP to games. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of DBZ, but it is a quest story, so it would work. Um, I think how to put this. All right, anything can be turned into a D&D story, or not a D&D, but into a gaming adventure or campaign. You just have to find the right angle. Um, any subject can be morphed into it, and even things that don't have a quest built into them can become a quest, because we just have to flex our imaginations. I mean, you can do anything to any topic and make it an adventure. And I caution people who feel that there are some things that are off limits or too dumb to turn into adventures, because I don't think that that's the case. I mean, I think it's a lie that we tell ourselves as gamers sometimes, that all scenarios have to be some ideal, you know, some level of validity to be considered useful or worthwhile. Um, and we ignore the fact that a lot of stuff just comes down to good, stupid fun. Um, I would say most campaigns in most games are over 50%, probably 60%, and maybe even higher, just good, dumb fun, with whatever's left over being like serious plot and character development and everything like that. Um, I mean, that those percentages are likely going to vary depending on the game. I mean, Call of Cthulhu is clearly going to be less dumb fun, but then again, it depends on how you're defining dumb fun. Dumb fun doesn't mean actually just goofy stupidness. Dumb fun just means the easy stuff. How many Call of Cthulhu stories start with you go into a creepy house? Clearly, cliche is not off limits, and sometimes a cliche is exactly what you need to go to keep your campaign going. You're at a lull creatively as a game master. You really can't think of anything to do. Okay, Matt Colville always talks about orcs attack. If you're if you're running into a slow point, a fight, just have a fight break out, or have a thief steal something from the party, and then you're going to spend the rest of that session hunting down that thief and trying to get the stuff back. Uh, and those are all cliches. I mean, you can you can utilize those as padding, as filler, whatever you want to call it. But it's also worth doing. It allows you as a GM to recharge your batteries. It allows you to fill in unplanned slow points. No matter how good you are, you're always going to run into that lull in your game where things aren't quite as energetic as you had hoped they would be. People are starting to look at their phones, whatever. Um, and you can bring it back by just saying, the door flies open. A man stands there with a gun. Uh-oh. You know. Let's see. Yes. uh, Friend of mine had, I can't remember the details of it because it was all the way, I mean, pre-middle school. Um, he had this thing that his paladin did, where he would plant his blade point down in the soil before him, and he would have to chant some sort of chant. Uh, that would then give him some sort of power up. And I mean, I'm using modern terminology. Back then, he had a name for it. I can't remember what it was, and I can't remember how he got it because he was from the other gaming group. In our neighborhood, there were like three different gaming groups, and we would cross paths every so often, like at school or at the park, or when we were all out in the woods running around beating each other up with sticks as our characters. Um, so it's kind of cool because you'd have these little micro communities who were part of a greater community, but at each table, things develop differently, and so you kind of get together and compare notes and stuff. It's kind of for you younger gamers. That's how it was done back in the days. Um, I don't know how many younger gamers are actually in this chat. I think we're all a bunch of old grizzled dudes. Um, let's see. Yeah, so I mean, covered the anthro animal thing. We covered the IP thing to death. I mean, honestly, my biggest suggestion is if you have a favorite IP, find a game system that fits it and work it into it. Like I said, we used Twilight 2000 for GI Joe because Twilight 2000 has a robust system of building characters out of different branches of the military, and it's also international um, because the Twilight 2000 setting covered all um, all all nations. So that allowed you to build the background for your GI Joe character. And also because the supplements came out for having like criminals and stuff like that in Twilight 2K, you could even do Cobra folks. And when Merc 2000 came out, in fact, I think it was actually Merc 2000 that we used because Merc 2000 assumes a world that is not devastated. Merc 2000 was the same system, but set in a world where the hot war never even flared up, even though in Twilight 2000 it never goes all the way. So it's more all the covert Black Ops stuff, which suits G.I. Joe a little bit better. Um, let's see. I always thought this would be a great way to build a bard class. If you were building a bard class from the ground up, um, go through the catalog of ancient medieval songs and come up with spell effects for them, um, or even just poems and stuff like that. So like poetic verse and all of that, it could be cool. All right, man. Hopefully, your systems will stabilize and you'll be able to stick around. But thank you for coming. Um, it's funny because talking about song lyrics for spells and other mechanics that I would love to use in games. I always liked how Ultima had the can't remember which Ultima it was. There were so many of them. Had the one where you sort of had actually all of them. I think for the most part, there was always that sort of weird like fortune teller session that created your character, or like directed your character. I always thought that would be a great way. Later, Jason. Thanks for stopping by. Um, I always thought that would be a cool way to do a character generation for an RPG, for a tabletop RPG, or if you're like doing a Norse themed one, imagine like a series of rune draws from the Futhark there would like determine what your character was. And I've talked about it with people who are like, oh, it's so random. I'm like, okay, well, rolling dice is random too, but uh, th- I think that would only appeal to a certain people. I know that for a fifth edition D&D campaign that I was doing that had a very Norse bent. I actually created a chart for the Norse runes that the players would roll on to determine their birth rune. I know that that's not really a thing in actual Norse philosophy, Norse belief, but for my fantasy Norse, it was going to be a thing. And each of those runes would then give them something extra under their character. Uh, you know, so it could just be an attribute bump. It could be a damage resistance, something like that. But yeah, I thought it would be fun to make each character just have a destiny. Um, uh, Yeah, I'm always loath to actually tie too much in a game to the player's actual ability, um, because most players don't have the skills of anything that they're playing. Most players. I would say, if you're playing a fantasy RPG and you're sitting down there, even the most hardened veteran, you know, modern day combatant at your table probably only has tangential experience to being a sword wielding knight. Uh, you know, um, so it's, no matter how badass anybody has ever been in HEMA or the SCA or anything like that, or historical reenactment, they've still never actually fought for their lives on a battlefield. So, I mean, um, it can be fun. This sort of a thing could be fun, um, for the sake of fun. Kind of like if you were writing a game where this was a thing and that was part of it. Yes, just like kind of like paranoia is written to be dumb and just kind of stupid fun. Um, if you were to try and put paranoia into another game, that could be annoying. Although, interestingly enough, there was an article in Dragon Magazine that talked about putting the. I'm not a paranoia enough person to know, but Geek would know what I'm talking about. The habitat that paranoia takes place in. There was an article in Dragon Magazine on how to take that and plop it in the middle of the Gamma World setting. And from the standpoint of either starting your players in there and then eventually like busting out of it and then finding out that there's a blasted world outside, or having characters in Gamma World find the paranoia setting as a city in Gamma World. Oh no, no. um I was not trying to tell you to shut up by any stretch of the imagination. It's just there are things that work as addenda. You can add anything into your game, and you're absolutely right. If your players are into it, then why not? Um, just always be careful as a GM what you wish for, because a lot of times the thing that you think is really cool and that your players are going to be cool with, you put it into play, and then like 4 sessions later, you're like, stop singing. Oh my God, stop singing. you know, if I hear you sing that spell and those song lyrics badly again, I'm gonna kill your character. Um, oh, hey, speaking of killing your character, um, for those of you who do follow Beck Me Berserker, you already probably know, but his channel is great if you like Beck Me. And for those of you who may not know what BECME is, which I don't think there's anybody here who doesn't, but just in case, that is the basic expert companion master immortal series, of essentially the fully realized BX style game D&D. Um, uh, BECME Berserker did a great video that dropped last night, but I just got a chance to watch it today on life level drain, and a really well-rounded um, discussion. Yeah, I mean, he's the only voice there, but I think it's still a discussion. I would call it a discussion because he looks at multiple points of view in it. Um, very good. Probably one of the best takes on the topic that I've heard in a long time. But yeah, Beck Me Berserker is always worth listening to. It's a great channel if you like Beck Me, or if you just like old D&D lore. It's a great channel. Well, yes, treasonous citizen elf bait, but elk bait. I got a K in there somewhere. Well, the computer is glitching. My middle initial at work on my official file at work is still wrong after working there for 16 years. Um, but my middle initial is also one of those ones that people see and it doesn't make sense to them. Like I don't. I have a feeling people have a hard time seeing that my middle initial, which is a U, but I won't say necessarily what my name is. Those who know. My middle initial is a U, um, and I think a lot of people reading that think that it has to be another letter because U is not a very common start to a name. Um, uh, Elk bait. I am elk bait. Um, that would be my barbarian character if I ever play one. I am elk bait. My tribe used to put me out there to attract the elks. I think it's because I smell. uh, let's see. Well, considering Justin became was it Haston at one point, something like that, or it was Huston, Houston, for a while. Why not? All right, let's see. I'd love to hear what your house rules for level draining are sometime. The It is not. Although I did actually know a friend. I had a friend growing up whose first name, his proper given name, was Ulysses. And because of that, he went by his middle name. Um, um, his brother also went by his middle name around the house because his first name, his given name, was also odd. But um, I was actually friends with his brother. But let's see. Life level drain. That's where I was. I feel like life level drain got nerfed. Way bad. In 5e. Um, I feel like every attempt to fix life level drain uh, has failed. I feel like 5e's version is way ham-fisted and uninspired and completely unimaginative and just, I mean, why even bother having it? I mean, I'm glad that they still have them doing something, but yeah. Anyways, um, the the older editions of Life Level Drain, watch Beck Me Berserker's video, but he talks about how the deadliness of Life Level Drain apparently was so bad that it started to affect the use of those kind of undead in games, uh, even in published games. And so I guess, and according to what he was talking about, now this is according to his video, um, that was sort of one of the precipitating reasons for why uh, the life level rules, the life drain rules started to change, is because if they're so, if people are receiving them so poorly that they're not using them, then why have them? And from a game design standpoint, that makes sense. Are there better ways to do it? Probably. Um, yeah, I think he's Jim Cody. You're talking about the fortune telling thing. I think that is a great way to create a game, to have a character generated in a game. I just don't know how to do it. That would be a big thing. Um, all right, well, if you guys would stop playing on days that I have to work, I might actually be able to join in. Do not change for me. That is just a friendly gripe. Um, Congratulations, Mara Hockman. You have broken my hyphen rule. No, whatever you enjoy. Not my cup of tea. Uh, let's see. Doo-doo-doo. Yeah, I feel like 5E's version of life level drain would actually be okay if it wasn't so easy to recover from things in 5E. I mean, attribute loss or maximum hit point loss is a pretty punishing way to do it as well. Or my favorite would be levels of exhaustion. But just the fact that it's so damned easy to recover from things in D&D, um, in 5e, it makes it really hard to make life level count. Actually, it's funny, is exhaustion, the rule that they forget exists, would be the best way in 5e, because in 5e, even with their recovery system, you only recover one level of exhaustion per long rest, I think it is, or something like that. So even if it's not as punishing as level drain, you would still spend some time recovering from that exhaustion. Um, Yes. I there's a lot of old school fictional basis and folkloric basis for how life level works that I think a lot of people lose in just examining the mechanics of it. From a purely mechanical standpoint, yes, but understand that life level drain is conceptually draining away what makes you you. It is basically your essence, to quote the Skeksis, is being pulled out of you, and therefore, yes, you could make a case that knowledge and experience is going away. um, Examples of this would be in some like gothic and Victorian horror and stuff, where just simply the touch of the dead would wither people and send them reeling, like, it grasped my hand and I felt myself swoon. That kind of a stuff is written into that life level drain. So yeah, I think there's a good case for having you lose knowledge if you understand the fictional basis that they were coming from when they're designing life level drain. It is also it is a gamist mechanic, and also remember, early D&D was a game as much, if not more, than it was an experience. Let's see. Yeah, Lost City is just a great module. It's one of the ones I had to pick it up when they did the old school remastered books. That's one of the ones that I really want. I still haven't got Temple of Elemental Evil, and I don't have any attachment to Castle Amber, so I haven't picked that one up yet. Um, but I do want to get the Expedition to the Barrier Peaks one they did. I'm hoping that they will do uh, Dwellers in the Forbidden City. I think that would be a great one because they could, really expand out on all of those little loose threads that book has. Um, yes, in all fairness, I mean, and again, I am not slamming anybody's idea of fun. I'm well aware where my limits are. You know, geek loves paranoia. I just can't get my head around it. Um, Yeah, and this is a good way of looking at it as well. I also always like to look at sort of the creative basis for things as well. I mean, there's a lot of fiction that supports their version of life drain. Um, yeah, and honestly, this is part and parcel with why life draining undead are brutal and nasty, because you should fear them. It's long been said, this is not anything that I made up or any profound conclusion that I came to, but life level drain was there to terrify the player as much as the character. The player didn't want his fighter dropping down 2 levels. The player didn't want his wizard, suddenly losing access to a bunch of spells. Um, so yes, you were terrified of that. The fact that when you learned, and legend says that the dead walk those ancient ruins, you're like, God, let it be skeletons and zombies, please, for the love of God. Because even something as common as a wight is bad news. You know, shadows, wights, wraiths, specters, vampires. I mean, you're like, God, I hope it's a mummy. You know, not a vampire, not a wraith. I'll take mummy. I'll take tomb rot any day. you know, tomb rot was pretty punishing too, though. Na, na, na. Looking over some of the comments here. The stat point accrual and subsequent loss of stat points is kind of, I may be misremembering. I think that's how third edition handled it. Third edition handled it where you lost ability score points. Like it drained constitution, and when you hit like 0, you died. Um, let's see. That's a good way to do it. Definitely, if you want to put it in a story context, and I'm sure, I'm sure that depending on your setting, you could also have magical means do that. Um, One of the things I found really interesting that I had forgotten when I was listening to Beckme Berserker's take on it is I forgot that the spell required the restoration spell was only available to like a 17th level cleric. I'm like, damn. And it required the cleric giving up a level of for one of his levels for a short period of time to restore a life level. I'm like, holy. You know, so yeah, I mean, it was the thing, like, okay, you're gonna that's what I've always talked about with the bad stuff from older editions creating story. Like character death creates story. You're either going to mourn the character and you're going to remember him, you're going to want to go get revenge, or you're going to go on a quest to get him back. But if a 17th level cleric is required to cast that restoration spell to get your levels back, it's questing time. Because I guarantee you, if that cleric has to lose a level to give you your level back, he's probably going to ask for something in return. Uh, Finding him alone is going to be one adventure. It's going to be one quest. And then doing whatever he requires of you to gain that spell is then going to be the next one. I'm pretty sure that money is not going to do it. Maybe if you want to build a new wing for the temple, but let's see. Going down, you guys are on fire today. I really appreciate the feedback, especially on an AMA where I have nothing planned. Yes, we should do a write-in campaign for Goodman Games to redo Dwellers. Although I don't know if they even have that going anymore. I saw that they were starting to kind of shift their focus. Let's see. Yeah, these two are related. I mean, every game systems that have vampires have other ways of doing it and making them punishing. But I mean, if you don't have levels, then of course level drain is kind of out the window. Um, Yeah, I think this is also why you started to see um, in old school D&D, they started to create other forms of vampiric undead and other lesser forms of vampiric or life level draining undead. So players could still face a vampire more frequent, especially like in settings like Ravenloft, where you would expect things like that to be common. Um, they would run into them. They could run into vampires and stuff, but not necessarily always have to be facing those ones that were going to cost them levels. Um, like I know in second edition Ravenloft, the box set, they had the Nosferatu in there, I think, and that the distinction there was they weren't all the crazy Count Orlok looking, guys. Their difference was they actually drained hit points, and they drained blood. I think I can't remember how they expressed it. It was either pure hit point damage or Constitution levels instead of life. Um, I'm horrible with module numbers. Um, so let's see. Later, Grumpy Old Slan, if you're already gone and I missed you, I'm sorry. I'm kind of playing catch up with the chat here. Uh, let's see. Yeah, I mean they're definitely pricey. And it took me a while before I was really cool getting them. I mean, to be honest, I think all of them have been gifted to me. um, because one of the problems is that you're paying for a lot that you're probably not going to use. You really have to be invested in the nostalgia of it and wanting to see the various permutations of the module. For like the this is the B2. Um, you get like three versions of B2 in there and like two versions of B1 in there. Um, so you're paying for a lot of repeated text and stuff. You really have to be into the nostalgia of it to make it worth your time. I do honestly wish that Goodman Games would make the 5e remakes of the reskins of those adventures available as a separate publication for those who weren't invested in the nostalgia or the deep nostalgia and just wanted a chance to play those old games, those old modules in a 5th edition write up. I also wish that they did a little bit more. I feel like Goodman Games sometimes is a little rushed, sloppy, whatever you want to call it. And I don't know them, so I don't know if this is the case. But I feel like in reading the 5th edition interpretations, that a lot of times there's not as much work put into reiterating the module to fit 5e. Um, but that's just me. Let's see. The Ravenloft box set introduced a lot of concepts that I thought were really great and fit really well for D&D. I liked the idea of uh, powerful undead with levels with age categories like dragons. It made a lot of sense. Vampires now could run from old to very ancient vampires. Your mummy lords could run from you got this concept of the generational undead that I thought was really good. Honestly, I mean, age categories is something that fits really well with a lot of monsters. There are other categorizations that have been used, like for example, the cosmology of D&D, demons and devils, has really this idea that the demons and devils are transformative in their ascension. So you're not going to have like an ancient type 6. A type 6 was probably a type 5 at one point before he got promoted or whatever. There's this kind of idea that they can, through their actions or through their function as in their realms, become different things. So there's no need for it there. I think like for the Fae, you wouldn't want to necessarily put in an age category thing for the Fae, because I mean the Fae are intrinsically all kind of like timeless, and they just sort of become a different kind of Fae. Um, but you could apply, age categories to a lot of things. I mean, an elemental with age categories seems really cool. I've stood the test of time. Da 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 da. I think it would be really cool for golems. I think golems going through age levels would be interesting, and like at the higher end levels of their age categories, they kind of break free of the magic that bound them, and they sort of become free. So you end up with like these powerful, independent golems roaming your fantasy world, or existing out there. Yes. I think that is a very accurate description. They are definitely more gamer coffee table books. They're there for those who appreciate the deep nostalgia. Um, yeah, Ents would be good to have for ages, um, especially considering trees are so characterized by their age. Um, um, well, I do like to talk. But yeah, ints definitely are an area where you could do age categories. I did One of the things I wrote up back in second edition, um, was I wrote up a haunted house monster. It was imagine, and the idea was the Hell House kind of concept, where you're not talking about one ghost. You're not talking about one spirit in a place. You're talking about a place that has become so permeated with evil, sorrow, whatever, that the place itself is an entity. And so I gave my haunted houses age categories, because the longer they were around and the more sorrow they built up and the more death that occurred there, the more that they just got bad. And I remember in that Ravenloft campaign, we even kicked around the idea that, um, like the Dark Lords of Ravenloft could gain power and stuff like that. That places in our campaign setting might have sort of a ticking time bomb of terrible things that were driving them towards becoming sort of these hell house kind of places. And that was kind of fun. I could not get in on that one. I really wanted to, um, but I don't I don't I don't have the flexibility to back Kickstarters like I used to. I was gonna back Shadow Dark. In fact, I backed twice and backed out twice. I felt bad. I'm like, here's my money. Nope. Here's my money. Nope. But yeah, I just I don't have it. you and if I do have money that I can spend on things, I'd rather spend it on the back catalog of things that I haven't picked up. Or I'm kind of at that place where any money I'm spending on games now is to try and enhance the things that I already have rather than buying into new things. I mean, Dark Tower would be another nostalgia purchase. I look over at my 2 volume set of the Glorantha, atlases, the big, lore books, and I'm like, I've never even played RuneQuest, but I have these just because I needed to have them. Because nerd, talk about coffee table books. Uh, let's see. It's a sign of a well-run game. The it's always cool when you can actually elicit real emotion in your players. I've only achieved that twice that I can remember, and only one of them I can remember the specific instance. I know I have had players actually sad to see NPCs go. Um, and I have the my claim to fame is getting the players in my Aliens RPG, my homebrewed Aliens RPG back in the day, to actually to be so on edge that they killed their lieutenant when he came around a corner. Um, because the players were just that jumpy that they're just like when I announced that something, around the corner comes, I fire, because they were just on edge and terrified in that scenario. Um, yeah, but if you can accomplish that, well done, sir, well done. But yeah, I when you get this geek, please, please do some coverage on it. I'm not even familiar with the original module or the original work that it's based on. I know it's sort of one of the seminal um, publications in gaming, and that's kind of where my interest was. Not to mention with all of the sort of renown that Janelle Jacquez has for um, her stuff, then it seemed like a really good thing to pick up. Let's see. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna pose a question to the group. We're into our second hour, but this is actually a really good AMA. What is a game? I want you to throw this up in the chat. What is a game that you have wanted to run but have a hard time finding people to run? And then if you can fit it in there, tell me why it is that you think it would be really worth running. Um, I'll start. um, for me, it is Tales from the Wood. And this is one of those games that people bounce off left and right. It is a RPG where you play non-anthropomorphic animals living in a quaint English countryside wood. Kind of, um, and you go through adventures as animals living in this world. There's a minor cosmology to it. And you have the bane and the way, which is just the animal's perspective on things like what is natural and what's not natural. And there are some slightly mystical elements to it. Um, there is the Lord of the Forest, who is a stag, and there's a gnome who is very much like David the gnome, who lives around. So there are some small non-realistic elements to it. Uh, I have run it for my kids, and we enjoyed it. My wife was a player in that game, but I really think it is one of those games that would come into its own if I could find grown-up players who wanted to play it. It is not happy-go-lucky animal time. It is the animals of Farthing Wood. It is Watership Down. It is the Rats of Nim, but without the super science. It is, it's all of those things that involve animals who are going through serious shit, but don't have, they're not wearing swords and armor and stuff like that. They're just animals. So, if you don't have hands as an animal, you don't have hands in this game. But you still, I mean, you talk and communicate with each other, and you kind of still exist on that level. But yeah, that's the one for me. Um, yeah, we've talked about the Burning Wheel before, Squirrel. Burning Wheel, it's one of those games that I honestly think it's the best game that nobody will or can run. There's just too much there. It is a series of amazing dissertations on ways to improve your game in the guise of an actual game. Ravenloft campaign, ultimately. So, a Ravenloft campaign in terms of Ravenloft the adventure or Ravenloft the setting? That one would be interesting because this Ravenloft is one of those ones that can be as horror driven or not as you like. It can be horror as in, oh my god, we're actually scared, and horror, good evening, schlocky, like, universal monster horror. It can vary. You don't have to, you can lean into it as much as you want. I've caught it before, um, bits and pieces here, so it's definitely worth it. It's kind of a dark fantasy setting, or at least gritty fantasy. Talislanta is one that I have I have owned in multiple permutations. I have the one I have currently is the big compiled third edition, I think it is. Uh, great, a greatly imaginative setting, but and definitely I've tried to run it, tried to play it, but I found that it's one of those games that is so dense as far as the content that you really have to pick like a corner of it to play to start in and then grow out of that naturally. Um, that was my experience when we ran it. We really we looked at just how many character races there are and how much is just going on in that world, and we're like, analysis paralysis. And so we just sort of picked a corner and then started there, and then that way we could get used to that and then sort of trickle in elements from there. But yeah, Talos Atlanta is a great setting. I dig it. It's one of my faves. Mar Hawkman, it does not have raccoons, um, because the species in the game are only the ones that are only native to the UK. The way it's written, you could adapt it to anything to be set in any other part of the world. The game even talks about creating other animals, um, because the set of animals are very generic, like a sparrow, a fox, a mouse, a rat, a weasel. You know, um, so yeah, there's that. Oh yeah, I mean, I know what it is. It is a good basis. It is a great way to. Um, it was a good way to tie Robin Hood into a greater mythology, and really tell a story about it. It's definitely some old school TV. Um, yeah. So I mean, Ravenloft is one of the like you said, that's one of those ones you can lean into. And as lean into the horror as much or as little. Also, because the way that the dark domains work in Ravenloft, when you get bored with one particular flavor of horror, you can just find a way to get your characters into a different domain that functions differently. So that's one of the really neat things about Ravenloft is that it's not one flavor of horror. Um, uh yeah, this is a it is definitely a big there's a lot going on there. There are like something like 100 some odd different races in the game. I can't remember what it was. Let me see if I can look it up real quick. How many races are in Talismana? Oh, I was wrong. There are only 30 playable races. I'm sorry. Mouse Guard seems cool. I liked the comics. That, and if you've enjoyed Mouse Guard comics and you haven't checked them out, there's another similar vein comic called Mice Templar, which was really cool too. That was a fun one. Uh, Mice Templar is not quite the same sort of scaled down. I mean, the nice thing about Mouse Guard is that every animal in Mouse Guard is the size it's supposed to be. Um, Whereas Mice Templar is different. It's hard to explain how it is different, but it is different. It's one of the problems I had when I read the Redwall books by Brian Jakes or Jaques or whatever. I think he pronounces it Jakes. But and it's his name, so he can call it whatever he can pronounce it however he wants. Is early in the series of books, it seems like the characters are existing in a world that is tucked inside our world, but later on, it seems that the 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 world has like rescaled to them, and the way it's written, where it kind of jumps around in history and stuff like that, it's kind of hard to test. Because I know, like in the first book, there's a wagon that's cruising along, and it's got like 30. It's got the entire crew of this one this pirate ship all over the cart. And I'm like, that's a lot of people. So it seems like there were a bunch of small rat. It could just be, I was reading it wrong. Um, let's see. Uh, it could be. The other thing I mean, a similar advice, just lean into it. The fact that it is a gimmick world, um, lean into it. Though once you're in the uh, the demiplane of fear of dread, demiplane of dread, um, you don't really know it. You're there. You're in a world. You're playing by the rules in that particular dark domain. Uh, so yeah, this is a way to do it. Uh, I've actually really thought about doing this to my players at some point, and that's just have them slip into a dark domain without knowing it. Misty day, foggy morning, going through the forest, it's cloaked in mists. A mist rolls in while they're sleeping. They wake up. Things are different. you know, it's honestly a great way to change the tone of a campaign. Let's say your campaign's been going a while, your party's kind of up there in levels, and you're feeling like maybe I need to mix it up a bit. Demi-plane of dread. They spend some time there figuring out how to get back, and you could take a tour on a couple of dark domains depending on how the campaign went. If they're digging it, then they don't. As long as they're having fun in Ravenloft, keep them there. And then once you realize that it's getting old, start working on that plot line to get them back. That would be a way. That's kind of how the box set was written. The box set was written honestly from more the standpoint of having your characters be from the dark domains. Um, but yeah, you could definitely do that. That would have been fun. Um, what would be interesting is if you pulled it off like a lot of the modern, oh my god, there's a surprise at the end of the season kind of things. Run the campaign as if they're just there, and then like they hit that barrier and they're like, what is this? There's a misty barrier and we can't cross it. Wait a minute, where are we? And then they start questioning their whole reality. Um, let's see. What's funny is if they're not in the Ravenloft domain, they're not going to hear the word Raven. They might hear the term if there were other people who know about the other domains, they might hear the word Ravenloft. But as far as I understand it, the domains are pretty isolated from one another because there's not free travel between the domains. And so, yeah, Ravenloft, if anything, it would be talked about as another kingdom. So yeah. Let's see. So another game that I would like to run, I mentioned it earlier, is Justifiers. Um, it is a game that suffers from lack of editorial process. It is kind of a one-man show, and so as you read the rules, there are some glaring errors that can be extrapolated through reading the entirety of the rules, but they're not clearly stated. I also feel like a lot of older science fiction games, it benefits from a slight um, uh, audit of the tech in there. There's no mention of drones, for example, in any of the equipment in Justifiers, and I can't imagine sending people to another planet to survey the planet without giving them drones. Um, you know, something that you can literally buy at a toy store today. Um, let's see. We don't have toy stores. What am I talking about? We're that far in the future. We don't even have time. We don't even have toy stores. Um, let's see. But yeah, Justifiers is interesting because all your characters, one of the calculated stats that your character has is called his buyback, and that is what you are working to pay off so you can become a free person. As a beta class hybrid, you were built by the corporations, and so technically are property. But because of some things that happened in society in the history, uh, beta humanoids can't be permanently property anymore. It was like, oh, that's bad. They have to have a chance to be able to. And this isn't like modern politics working in. This is actually in the setting. There's like this big fight about, um, the status of thinking, feeling, living beings as property, and that they have to be, you know, the corporations, considering they rule it, they govern everything, end up uh, still being able to hold on to them by giving them these crippling buybacks. I mean, I had a character who had I think like a $3 million credit buyback. Um, but also like even the non-beta class characters have buyback because they're either under contract or they have been bailed out by the corporations. Like if you're playing an altered human, altered humans were the super soldiers of the last big war. Um, in my game, I even expanded that to where altered humans were for the longest time sort of the way they were built for specific purposes. So you might have like a gladiator altered human. So I made all these different sub races for them. But the idea is that they have a hard time integrating into society because they're built for one thing. And so a lot of them have ended up in the prison system and all of that. And so they get bought out by the corporations who then send them off to be justifiers. There are regular humans in the game even, and you still have a buyback because chances are you're probably a criminal in prison or you're under serious contract. Maybe your parents owed a debt to the corporation, and so, well, guess what? You inherited that debt. The only ones that in the game that voluntarily tie themselves into buyback for the corporations are the high G humans, who are, I don't like the way they're shown in the illustrations. They're really depicted boringly, basically space dwarves. But the high G humans are are miners and stuff who work on high G worlds. It also seemed really weird in the setting that, I mean, humanity doesn't seem far flung enough to have high G humans yet. And also, in a world where you had high G humans and altered humans, why don't we have the low G humans? It's something I actually added into the game. But yes, it is a good game. It's fun. It's very mission driven because the group has you go to a planet, you search around and investigate planet, you come home, and then after you come home, you go on your next mission, and there's a mission brief, and then there's some things that are put in place, like you have to anything that's corporate property that you destroy in the process of running of doing your mission gets tacked onto your buyback. Oh, sorry that you destroyed that helicopter to kill that giant alien beast that you were fighting, but you know, you can pay it off. But it's a fun game. It's a little quirky in its game mechanics, and the creators really went way. The later publications started to add some interesting stuff, like they have a weird sort of magic in it, which is sort of questionable whether it's actually magic or if it's just technology far beyond our understanding. But yeah, it's a fun one. Let's see. Star Trek is a good game. I've enjoyed the many Star Trek games I've run. I always wanted to, and I did try to run a Klingon-based Star Trek game, but we were too young, and my players just spent the entire game always trying to kill each other. And they would just use the justification, well, he was being dishonorable. That's what Klingons do. I'm like, fortunately, we have the benefit of many, many, many seasons of Star Trek since then that demonstrate that Klingons are a little bit more nuanced. So, yeah. Well, and the thing is, so the key with Justifier's characters is, and I said that the only ones that tie themselves into a buyback are the high G humans. That's not entirely true because it's a role playing game. So you could have an altered human, for example, who wasn't in trouble with the law, but really just feels like he's got no place in life, and so he hires on with the corporation and he takes on a contract. And so buybacks are also a reflection of contracts. So I could see a low G human like, okay, well, only so much I can do in the orbitals or on this moon. I really want to see get a better lot in life, and that would be an interesting character because that character would then have to spend all of its time in an exoskeleton to be able to function on planets with regular gravity. So it'd be an interesting character to play. Yeah, I mean, and it very much allows a GM who's into sci-fi and likes to create worlds and creatures and situations to really play on it. And a lot of the fun is the things that go wrong. And the things that go wrong can start from the very beginning. When in that game, the way they get you to the world is they have these gates, and the gates can only stay open so long, and they can only be built so big. And so they chuck you through it. They pick a point in space that they've surveyed with satellites that looks like a promising planet. And then they load up a shuttle that is built to the maximum size it can in terms of diameter or area, in its cross section and length based on how long they can keep the gate open. They put you, your crew, and your equipment on that shuttle, chuck you through that gate to that point in space, and you get there and you have enough fuel to land. You can't take off again once you land. And then you have to get to the planet surface, set up your base camp, survey the planet while trying to set up your return gate. But your return gate won't activate until X amount of time goes by because the corporation wants you to stay on the planet and do your job. And the the gate only returns to headquarters, basically. So you have no control over where the gate goes. You don't have any direct control of the gate, even once it's assembled. So it's very much you know, it's a game that's got a lot of built-in limitations. Like, you only show up with the equipment that's on the shuttle, and the shuttle goes into vast amounts of detail on exactly what is on that shuttle. Um, there are some things you can do, like you do have a portable fuel refinery, so if you can find some natural resources that can be converted into fuel to fuel your vehicles and stuff. There's a water purifying station. You have elements, but the shuttle doesn't even have crew quarters on it. You're expected to camp outside the shuttle, um, in tents. I mean, in some of the games I ran, the players got smart and like emptied the cargo bay and set up shelter in the cargo bay. But the shuttle ostensibly just becomes like your command state, your command base, your command center. Um, if we were running a Klingon campaign and you decided to play a Romulan, I would tell you to make a new character, because I'm not a fan of people making characters that break the theme of the themed campaign, unless they have a really good reason. Um, let's see. Romulans did not have honor. They just had honesty, and they weren't even honest. The Romulans were the fact the as Star Trek has gone on, it is realized that people are people, no matter how many head ridges they have or how pointy their ears are, and so no race of people is really one thing. And they started to write that more and more in there, because the Romulans were factionalized. They have layers within layers of deception and deceit, and they're not honorable. The Vulcans even started to develop some depth. Ultimately, it came down to all races in the galaxy are just people. Let's see. This is an oversimplification. Romulans will backstab the crap out of other races. They're just very good to themselves and their families and stuff. The Romulans do not care about other races. um, Anyways, anybody else got any games that they've always wanted to run but haven't really had a chance to run them? Oh, sorry, my kid was texting me. My kid who plays in my D&D game, which is tonight. Yay! All right, you're quickly approaching my hyphen rule. Let's see. I want to run Gamma World. I'm still in the process of putting together sort of a Gamma World open table to be run when I can get players. Kind of in the old West Marches angle of like, we'll have a fixed day, but I'll run if we have enough people interested. I feel Gamma World sets itself up well to that kind of play, where you have a settlement and you do forays out into the wilderness, into the wasteland to find things, and then you kind of come back. Second edition even has rules on settlements and building your reputation and influence in that settlement based on your actions. So it's a really big drive for players. Yeah, that's the old gaming group back in Washington, man. 400 plus board games. We never play them all. Top Secret is a good one. I remember playing that back in the day. I remember blowing up Spreckenhalterstein. Yeah, we got bored and just decided to blow up the city because we were 10. Um, but, yeah, I had fun with that. I really Top Secret SI is the last one I remember, and I remember that, like a lot of the second generation TSR products, it had a lot more in its books, but it was a lot more fluff in its books also. So I kind of bounced off it earlier on, which I did not, because there was some good stuff. I used to have a book from it that was just a book of gear, and I really liked that one because that was useful for other things. I hear the new Twilight 2000 is actually worth checking out. I think Free League or um, Modifius did it. I can't remember which of the two. Um, but not because not only does it actually talk about setting up a settlement and a stronghold or whatever, it actually has mechanics for doing that in the game, which is kind of cool. I have a fun anecdote to share about Top Secret. So when I was playing Top Secret, I was in 6th grade. Um, and so my friend had picked it up and he was going to run me through Spreckenhalterstein. Um, After we got back from this weekend camp. So in Washington State, all the grade schools um, go to these various camps um, for like a sleepover style camp, but they go there for like about a week. And in like 6th grade, 5th or 6th grade, depending on the school district you're on, and you just there's you go there and like Camp Orkila, the one I went to was um, an environmental awareness type of a week thing where we learned about alternative energies and things like that. But we also got the camp experience, archery and all that. It was a way to let every kid have some camp time. It's really fun. But so I ended up in the same cabin as my GM, and he was going to be reading the module while we were at camp. And so we're playing an espionage game, and my parents had sent me to camp with one of those old, Kodak 110, little clicky cameras, not the disposables, but an actual camera with a built-in flash, but uses the 110 film. Um, and I decided to be sneaky, and while he was out of the cabin one day, I came in and did the spy thing and took pictures of the maps. And so I had my mom. We got back from camp, and I'm like, "Mom, you have to develop these quick. Can we go to the photo mat?" And so yeah, I engaged in real espionage to play my top secret module. Um, and he found out about it, and I got in trouble from my GM, so it was fun. He got really mad at me actually. I'm like, "What? It's a spy game. I was spying." Um, that was also the year that we had a teacher change our badge name, our badge icon. So we all got to draw a character to be our cabin badge, and my cabin was all gamers. I mean, how awesome is that? You're going to be away at camp for a week, all bunking up with a bunch of gamers in your own cabin, with a table in the middle of the cabin with chairs. Gaming, it's going to happen, right? Um, so we decided we were going to be the Wood Elves. That was going to be our cabin name, and we had this really badass wood elf drawing, or at least we thought it was badass. I drew it because I was always the pencil whore in the groups that I was with, because I had that skill. I could draw, so I drew this badass wood elf. And it's probably very much inspired by ElfQuest at the time because I was obsessed with that comic. And the teacher who was in charge of all that looked at it and decided that our elf was not an elf, and he put this stupid ass Christmas elf on our badge. So not only did he change my art, not only did he not give us we were still the wood elves, but then we had to go through the entire camp experience being that cabin that had that dumb Christmas elf on their badge. Um, yeah, and you wonder why people want to kill their teachers sometimes. Uh, but uh, uh, Slan left, unfortunately. Um, it was in that class that I discovered the Prince in Waiting books and the Wolf King that I was talking to Slan about. Let's see. Yeah, yeah, it sounds so profound a name, Spreckenhalterstein, but I think it translates to something like to speak while holding a stone is what it means, or something like that. Um, which I guess could be profound because who knows what it commemorates. But um, yeah, those who hunt elves. I'm not familiar with that, Hawkman. Please explain. Sorry, my kids still need to communicate with me from time to time, and I have to get back to them in a timely fashion because they're 1,000 miles away. So any help I can give them is going to take time uh, to put into process. We are actually coming up on hour number 2 and the close of the stream. So we're going to start winding down here. I would like to thank everybody who showed up: General Nut, From the Hilt, Grumpy Old Slan, Mage's Musings, GM Cody, Mar Hockman, uh, Yog is here. How could I forget him? Squirrel Hermit. Jason was here earlier from Mechhead Studios. Echo snuck in. Hey, Echo. Sorry I didn't call you out earlier. But yeah, lots of folks showed up. We capped that at about 9 folks today, so it was great. And I really appreciate the conversation and the prompts to talk. Nice thing about the AMAs is just we're here to enjoy. Um, uh, oh, so it's an isekai story. Okay. Um, anyways, I will leave it here then. Probably slip out and go ahead and make myself some breakfast and get on with my day. So GM Cody, Mage's Musings, The Old Geek, Mechhead Studios all have their own channels. From the Hilt, he has his own channel now, or he's had it for a bit. Definitely worth checking them all out. Thank you all for coming today, and I think next week I'll be back probably with some sort of topic to talk about. Um, if you have any suggestions, throw them at me on the Discord. Real quick on the Discord, I'm still slowly but surely working with that whole Fiend Folio dungeon build where I'm going to be slowly building with, hopefully with collaboration from folks on the Discord, a dungeon that uses just monsters from the Fiend Folio, the original Fiend Folio, because I feel that that book uh, has a lot of good monsters in it, but they are often very unsung. And it would be fun to make a dungeon that just uses the monsters in there. So far, we got 2 rooms. We got the entry room that Yog picked a monster for in there, and then we have now room number 2, which was Guns Are Cool is the one who suggested the monster on that. The more participation that we get on that, the more creative and imaginative it will be. So by all means, if you haven't jumped in to participate and you have access to an original Fiend Folio, please come in because the more the merrier. And I'll get back. I'll feed more information out on that Gamma World game as I have more solid information. I really just threw out the original sort of, this is the thing I'm thinking about doing to see what the interest was. So if there's enough interest, then I'll put the time and effort into it. If not, then I'll just shelve it for later. On that note, everyone have a good day, and I'll see you next week. And I'll probably see you on some of your streams. So take care.